Many know that the UU Church was created in 1961 in the merger of the Unitarians and the Universalists. But who were they? And where did they begin? Where should we start? Well, Christianity started with Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Then we had Noah and the ark and the flood. Then Abraham was told by God that he would be the father of the great nation after he was tested. Birth of the Jewish religion. Then, about 700 years later, Moses led the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt in the desert, where he received the 10 Commandments, and then on to the Promised Land. About 1,200 years later, Jesus was born, preached, was killed, and later resurrected. His band of 12 disciples started what we know of as the Christian religion after his death. Phew! I think our story begins right after Jesus died. The people who were Christians just couldn't agree on a lot of things. One of the things they couldn't agree on is what Jesus was. Many people said Jesus is human, just like you and me. Other people said, no, Jesus is God's son. He's special. Some people said, no, Jesus is equal to God. Then other people started to think, well, wait a minute. If Jesus is equal to God, then we're worshiping two gods, and we're supposed to only worship one. Can you believe that this arguing went on for hundreds of years? For over 300 years after Jesus died. Finally, in 325 AD, Emperor Constantine, who was Christian, said, I'm going to settle this once and for all. I'm going to call together all the leaders and the Christians and have them vote on this. My empire needs a strong Christian religion, not one that's divided. They couldn't agree. But he gave up, and he voted. And he decided on the Trinity. He decided that Jesus is equal to God. But there's actually 3 parts of God: the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. All 3 are one, like the 3 circles make up one shape, or the 3 make up a shape, or a triangle has 3 sides. So it's 3 equals 1, the Trinity. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit is God, but it's just one God. So this worked for a really long time. Around 10,000 AD, a part of the church that was more to the east broke off, but the Roman Empire, the Roman Catholic Church, continued. Now, during the medieval time, in Europe, the church was a key part of everyone's life in a way that we almost can't imagine. The church was where you went to parties, where you had celebrations, where you got married, you died, you had births were celebrated. The church was everything to these folks. But the church was sort of focused on the afterlife. They thought that people should really worry about what was coming after this current life and not worry about. And part of that was these really scary depictions of hell or purgatory. So here's a medieval picture of hell, and you can see horrible things happening. They were kind of preoccupied with death, and death was kind of everywhere. Now this continued for quite a while, until we come to the Renaissance. People are starting to read, books are being published, the Bible's being published. Before then, very few people read the Bible. And people started to read the things in the Bible and realize that hell really wasn't in the Bible that much. And people were fighting over their. So one of the things that people really didn't like was something called indulgences. So here's hell, and here's heaven, and here's our people. Here's our people. And the Catholic Church was selling indulgences. So people who were rich could pay money to the Catholic Church. Here's the Catholic Church. And that money would make it so they can do bad things and still go to heaven. And the people who didn't pay money were going to go to hell. Now, there was a gentleman named Martin Luther. He was a priest, and he thought this was terrible. He thought lots of things were terrible, actually. And he was really the first person to fight against the Catholic Church and say, hey, this stuff isn't cool. And he started a church called the Lutherans. So all of a sudden there was two churches. Well, the Lutherans, Martin Luther, kind of thought that only Satans went to heaven and everybody went to hell. Now, once Martin Luther started his own church, other people started churches. So another really big one was John Wesley, who started the Methodists. Now, John Wesley was a little better. He said if you confessed, you got to go to heaven. So if you said to the church, hey, these are my sins, this is what I did wrong, you went to heaven. But if you didn't confess, even like babies and kids, you went to hell. There was also the Calvinists. We've talked about the Calvinists before. The Calvinists said that when you were born, God already knew whether you were going to go to heaven or hell, but your behavior showed whether you were going to go to heaven or hell. So this kid is very, very good all the time, so he's going to go to heaven. So is his mom. His dad's not so good sometimes, so he's going to go to hell. Now, these were the main ideas for, the 1500s to the 1700s. A lot of hell, kind of dark and gloomy. All of a sudden, a new idea came around. And this new idea was the idea of a loving God. And this loving God loved his people so much, no one is going to go to hell. They're all going to go to heaven. Everyone's going to heaven. And this idea was called universal salvation. And the people who believed in this were started called the Universalists because they thought universal, everyone, went to heaven. No one went to hell. And these were the Universalists. All right, so that's our Universalists. What about our Unitarians? Well, we need to come back to the Nicene Creed idea. Because around this same time, some ideas returned from before the Nicene Creed. The idea that Jesus is human. And that there's only one God. Now, this is Trinitarian or tri, meaning three. So una, meaning one, Unitarian, were the people who believed not in the Trinity, but that Jesus was human and there was only one God. And they were called the Unitarians. So we've got our Unitarians who believe in one God, not the Trinity. And we have our Universalists who believe in a loving God, universal salvation for everyone. So these ideas came to America or flourished in the 17 and 1800s, both the Unitarians and the Universalists. By 1961, the Unitarians and the Universalists were a strong presence of liberal faith in America when they joined together to become the Unitarian Universalist Church.
I wonder if you have ever heard or seen any of this before. I wonder if you have ever believed something that the people around you do not believe. I wonder why the Unitarians and the Universalists joined together. I wonder what you think about what Jesus is. I wonder what you think about the afterlife and hell. I wonder if this story reminds you of any of our Unitarian and Universalist promises.